Today I'm sitting down with Mitch Casey from Ball Boys Fantasy as we continue our analyst journey during the off-season, chatting about life away from the court or the virtual court. Let's go balls deep.
I could bet all of the riches that I ever had.
Welcome to another episode of the Balls Deep Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Fantasy Basketball International. FBIbasketball.com is the website. Head over there, check out all of Matt Lawson's Dynasty stuff that he's got coming out. My rankings, which I stupidly put out already. You can find me on Twitter at AdamKing91. I'm chatting with Mitch Casey, as I said. Mitch, good to have an Aussie. Good to be doing this at a reasonable hour of the day. How are you?
Yeah, mate, it makes things a lot easier. I'm doing well. Good to catch up with you after a little while. How are things going with you, mate?
Yeah. Look, life's good. Life's busy. It is for everyone. It's actually good that basketball has cooled off a little bit. It gives me time to do some other things. And you've obviously you've got the fantasy basketball stuff going and some AFL stuff, which we'll talk about. Anyone that listens to your show. Yeah, anyone that listens to your show will have listened into that, well, whatever it was, a 10-minute show that you did explaining where you went and what happened. So if you're not sure, go and check that out. There was a good reason for you sort of stepping away slightly for a couple of months.
Yeah, no, we're back though. We're back on board. Obviously, it's a roller coaster. The fantasy basketball, especially season. Obviously, news happens very, very quickly, and want to put out a good product and trying to stay up to date as much as possible. So we're back into it. Off season is on right now, but the fantasy basketball content doesn't stop. So
It does not. So starting first question here. I guess fantasy basketball. With some analysts, I know the answer to this. With some, I don't. With you, I do. Fantasy basketball is not your full-time job, and your
unfortunately not yet.
Unfortunately not. Sadly, we'd all like that.
Yeah.
So I guess a couple of parts to this question. What away from fantasy basketball? What is it that you do? Share as little or as much information as you like.
That's fine. That's all right.
And then following on from that, I guess where you started in the fantasy sports domain to where you are now, what's that journey been and looked like for you?
Yeah, so I guess away from fantasy basketball and podcasting and things like that, I'm an exercise physiologist by trade. So work a lot with athletes and also with people doing rehab from injuries and things like that. So I guess I do that as I work for myself, self-employed, which allows me to do a little bit of flexibility in my work and obviously juggle the many things that I've had going on the last couple of years. So have a lot to do with exercise and sports from, I guess, a physical and science point of view. So that's sort of what I do with my day job. It involves obviously me getting up very early most mornings. So most mornings I'm up as early as 4:30 in the morning. A lot of the time it's going to work, do that for 3 or 4 hours, come home, watch basketball, record a podcast if I'm recording that day, then go back to work to catch people after they finish their work, and I can see them in the gym and do their rehab or whatever have you, and then come home late, repeat all the next day. So every day is a little bit different for me, but I guess the beauty of it and working for myself is the flexibility allows me to pursue these kind of interests. And so that's sort of my background in the other side of my life, the professional side of my life. And fantasy basketball has just sort of been something that I've done basically, I think, what are we now, 2023? About 12 years now. I've played with my mates since high school. Always been a basketball fan, basketball player myself growing up. Never really that good at it, but always had a passion watching the pros and things like that. And decided in 2020 when COVID hit and we're all sort of sitting around without any sport to watch, twiddling our thumbs, always had good conversations with my mates, talking trash to each other about basketball. Thought we'd just record it one day, and it started out just being a regular NBA podcast where we were talking about the bubble and things like that. And then as the next season came around, we started talking about fantasy basketball because we all played in a league together, and that picked up a bit of traction. People seemed to enjoy what we put out, so ever since then, sort of converted into a fantasy basketball podcast. And that's sort of, we've been sort of going from strength to strength. This is it would have been the third season that we did the last season. So coming up to season 4 now.
And as you mentioned, it's 12 years. That's similar to me, I guess, my timeline. And for me, it was similar. It was just I was writing articles for our league and doing things like that, and people sort of said, "Hey, these are pretty good." And you sort of contact people, you reach out, you make connections, and off you go. You've actually taken your love, I suppose, of fantasy sports in general, and I can see the AFL ball behind you. I think Americans might not know what that ball is, but I can see it.
Yes.
And I can see on the top shelf there
Richmond. Little Richmond. Yeah. We've got a few little bits of memorabilia here.
So little clues and Easter eggs as to your other passion, which is, and I mean, anyone that listens, it's fantasy AFL and AFL in general as well.
Yes.
So you've obviously transitioned a little bit into that the last 6 months, I'd say. It's ramped up quite a bit.
Yeah, we've started. We've just recently launched the Ball Boys AFL Fantasy Podcast, which is something that we sort of I'm doing with my partner's brother, actually, who lives very close around the corner to us. So it's made it really easy for us to connect and just talk about AFL fantasy. I'm a little bit more recent to that sport and that format of fantasy sports, but it's something that I've definitely enjoyed. It's very different to like a fantasy basketball in the sense that, fantasy basketball, you're in a league with your mates competing against 11 to 19 other people or whatever have you. But in fantasy AFL, it's a bit more of an Australia-wide competition where, the winner at the end of the year wins a car. The top 100 win these very prestigious top 100 hats with your ranking on it and things like that. So it's a bit of a different salary format type game. But it's something that I've played a lot and had some decent results over the last couple of years, and it's something that I think I'll continue to do, especially in the off season of basketball. The AFL and basketball seasons marry up quite nicely, where one is on, the other's off. There's a little period at the end and start of each that it'll be quite busy, but at least at the moment, it's pretty manageable for me to cover both. So.
It is. It's one. So I spoke with Matt Smith a couple of weeks ago. I don't know what order we're releasing these, but spoke with Matt Smith, and he's a big AFL fan as well. And we spoke about that we are quite lucky here with how the football codes and how the basketball, and now the NBL, because our National Basketball League, it doesn't mirror the NBA because we don't have as many teams or as many rounds.
Yeah, it doesn't go quite as long.
But the season falls at the same time.
Yeah.
So we basically have sport 365 days a year.
Yeah.
Without a significant crossover where you're having to go, well, what do I watch today? Do I watch basketball? Do I watch football? So we are pretty lucky. And as you said, fantasy football is quite different over here. And I don't do fantasy AFL, but I do fantasy rugby league. And
it's Supercoach.
Supercoach. So same sort of concept where you're against anyone who's in fantasy, really. So it is, it is a little bit different, but I've been enjoying it. My first year doing fantasy league, and maybe next year listening to your show, you'll be able to talk me into doing fantasy AFL.
It's a great community, so you're always welcome, mate. And there is a super coach version of AFL as well. I think there's two competing sort of games there, but quite similar, I guess, as opposed to the rugby league.
It's more, I think for me with fantasy, I know with fantasy basketball, I like this time of year because, fantasy is scaled way back. I don't have multiple teams on the go at once that I'm monitoring and watching waiver wires, which takes up a lot of time.
It does, yes.
for me during the regular season, and I think this is just a me thing. I don't think this is a fantasy thing, but I actually find it hard. Not hard, but if I have so many players on the go, I don't know what team to watch, and
Yeah,
I
yeah,
always feel like when I watch my players, so say I've got, I don't know, say I've got Kevin Durant and Devin Booker for some reason on my team, and I always feel like if I'm watching them play, they play worse than if I don't watch
yeah,
them play. I
yeah. I
don't know
get
if
that.
that's a me. Is that
I,
something
I
that
can
happens to
definitely get
you?
that. I usually it's tough. Like especially like this most recent season. At the start of the year, I put out a season guide at the beginning of the year and sort of for the first time put like my rankings out there in a very like this is the rankings, this is it sort of a way instead of like that more general sort of advice through the podcast platform and. Some of the guys that I put a bold claim on, that maybe weren't performing very well. I was sometimes I'd be like, okay, I've got to watch them like a hawk to see if I'm,
Yeah,
missing something, or sometimes I just go, oh, I'm thinking about it too much. I'm stressing myself out too much. So I'm going to flick over to another game where I, got someone who I haven't ranked quite as highly, or
yeah,
the take wasn't quite so hot, and just sort of enjoy the basketball. But it is, it is interesting, sort of the rituals and I guess
yeah.
superstitions we, we develop as fantasy coaches as well.
That's right.
I do this thing where I'll watch the game and then I'll only check the stats like every quarter
Yep.
because I want to watch the actual thing and not just follow the numbers because I get really caught up, or sometimes I trick myself into thinking that they're not going to go up as much while I'm watching them. So
Yep.
yeah, we
Yep.
all do funny sort of things, I reckon.
And I know if I'm in a close matchup and it's Monday for us when the matchups end, normally around
Yeah, Monday
lunchtime, mid
morning. Yeah,
afternoon on a Monday when they
yeah,
end. For me, if it's a close matchup, especially towards the end of the season, I don't check the box scores or anything until
yeah,
I get home from like I don't want to see it going up and down because that
yeah.
stress of
Stress. Yeah, no,
oh
no,
I
no.
need 2 steals and oh man what the hell like Mason Plumlee just got 4 blocks and
Yeah,
so yeah it's it does get frustrating and this time of year is nice because I don't have any of that to worry about so
yeah,
um and yeah I mean on I guess when you do look at rankings as I said I've put my rankings out I think over time like I know I've done rankings probably for I don't know 4 years or something and if you have a look at, so Matt Lawson just he spent a long time on it too. I know he
yeah. I
did.
did see that. Yes.
He's just released a spreadsheet sort of compilation of a number of analysts. I think he had about 10, maybe 10 or
Hmm.
12, and had a look at all of our preseason ranks and then lined them up with where players finished the season and graded them accordingly and stuff. And you look through there and you can see like analysts are never bang on. And
Oh,
I think
absolutely.
like
Yeah,
um, a name that sticks out for me with you this season, and I don't know why, was Tobias Harris. I don't know whether it's just because you were
yeah.
so against him. That
I was
name just
definitely
sticks in
against
my
him.
head.
Yeah, yeah,
And then he started out and he was getting all these steals somehow and
yeah,
doing all these things he's never done in his career. And
yeah,
I don't know why that one stuck with me. I mean, he wasn't
yeah.
great,
I think he
but
was. He was. I made a video. I think he was like the top 3 or 4 in terms of my busts for the year. And yeah, he definitely came out better in terms of the rankings than I sort of expected to. And I'll put my hand up and say I was a little bit maybe too
uh,
ahead of myself in terms of the demise or predicting the demise of Tobias Harris. He did, in fairness to me, he did the second half of the year. I just did a recent
yeah,
video on this based on sort of the post trade deadline, rises and fallers. He definitely fell off the second half of the year because those steal numbers came down. But
yeah,
like you said, like we're never going to be 100% right, and especially like because the NBA season is so long, things can change so dramatically. With the trade deadline and things like that. Um, you know, a season rank doesn't always like tell the full story of a
no,
player. Like if you look at someone like Jalen Williams, he had a complete season of 2 halves.
yeah,
These kind of guys can completely turn themselves around, because of one thing or another. So whilst that is always good to go back and refer what they did the last year, I always do think it's important to make sure we understand rankings and what they actually mean in terms of how we can use them to do
yeah.
well in our fantasy leagues, because they are not always the be all and end all.
No, absolutely not. And I mean, there's plenty of good examples of that. Like if you looked at pure rankings, I think Giannis was outside the top 100,
Yeah.
we know that's not right.
That's not reflective of what he's doing for your team, especially in head-to-head leagues.
That's right, and I think
190 was,
and so like I know Josh on his podcast, he's doing all the team breakdowns at the moment, and when he talks about player ranks, he talks about the minus, is it a -1 rank? I think he calls it, where you
-1 rank,
subtract their worst category. And I like that idea because a lot of people punt. I love punting, and so your rankings they don't really take punting into consideration a lot of the time. So
yeah, I did something similar with my season guide last year. I referred to it as like a punt ranking, where I would basically give their turnover rating a half weighting, and then I would punt the category that you would probably expect to punt with that with that player. So like a Giannis, or it'd be a free throw percentage. If it was someone like a Kyrie Irving, you might be punting rebounds, for example, or a better example might be a Steph Curry punting blocks, those kind of things, and how that actually values the player. And I think that's a better way to sort of go into a season, because then it does, like a Tobias Harris, someone who's kind of even across the board, because he's not contributing a whole bunch in a few categories. He's kind of doing average across everything. Because of that way I look at things, and this is very much slanted towards head-to-head leagues, that definitely gives, at least in my opinion, a better understanding of what a player's value is to your team if you go about punting correctly. And a lot of people, are for or against it, or don't quite understand how to do it properly. But that's kind of the way I view it. So I think that's a good way to sort of view a player's quote unquote value.
And I think alternatively, you can look at it from the reverse perspective, in that if you were to take away a player's best category, someone like a Miles Turner or Nick Claxton, who their value is heavily weighted towards blocks, take that away. So like Claxton, I think you look at him, he was like a top 20 player or something. He's not really a top 20 player. He's just a really good shot blocker.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think I was doing the same thing as well for like a player like a Zion as well in the preseason. Like we were all getting bent over like what he could be doing, because his field goal percentage was like 60% on 20 attempts or whatever it is. Like it's only one category at the end of the day, and you can only have so good of a field goal percentage. Like if you beat every team by 15% in field goal, like there's still only one win at the end of the day. So
that's right.
Keeping that in mind, and like that you said, like those blocks and steals, like they do also fluctuate. So rankings are good, but at the end of the day, in my experience, especially in the head-to-head category leagues, that's sort of something a lot of people maybe sometimes fail to understand when constructing their team. So something that I'll hope to continue to find a maybe better way to articulate a player's value moving forward in sort of the way I go about things.
And for a podcast where we're not meant to be talking about fantasy, that's a lot about fantasy.
All right, let's get off that. We can go on for ages.
I mean, you've got your job, you've got fantasy, obviously. Outside of those things, I'm fairly certain you don't have kids.
No kids at the moment, although we've got a little baby nephew and a baby niece on the way. So we're soon to be my partner warming and I, uncles and aunties. So warming up. Not our turn just yet, but
No. So when you're not working, when you're not doing fantasy, you traveled. I know recent-ish you traveled. So in terms of travel, other hobbies, what sort of makes up the rest of your life?
We love to travel. My partner and I, recently we went over to Europe, which was amazing. We were over there in winter. I'm a big fan of getting outdoors. I'm a big skier. I like to, whenever I can, go on a ski holiday. I've traveled to a few places, skied a lot of places around the world. So very keen on sort of the outdoors and experiencing different cultures and things like that when I can. Obviously, it's a little bit more difficult in Australia, a little bit further away from everything. Doing a lot of that. I'm a bit of a nerd as well. I watch a lot of movies and pretty into pop culture and things like that. So get quite into seeing a lot of film and TVs. I'm not too big of a party animal these days, so I spend a lot of time sort of chilling at home, hanging out with friends. I love playing poker, so big. Wouldn't say I'm not a gambler, but I love the tactile and strategic element of poker and things like that. So my friends and I host like a monthly poker tournament, which we do, which keeps us busy. And yeah, a lot of different things on the run. But yeah, travel is definitely something that I do a lot of. And I've been to the States a few times, seen a few NBA games in my time, which is always a highlight going over there. So yeah, a few other
And
little things
so
going on.
movies is a big passion of mine as well. Any specific genre, any specific movies? Like if someone asked you, oh, what are your favorite movies or TV shows, would
Yeah.
you have an answer, or is that like a 4 hour discussion?
Yeah, it's like a 4 hour discussion, I think. I'm a big, I do like a lot of science fiction, is sort of, I guess, a broad term, but a very wide range of movies. Like, I think one thing that my partner and I do, we watch all of the, I guess, all of the Academy nominated films every year.
Yeah,
As a lot of them often go over our heads, but we watch all the ones that are more critically acclaimed. And often you find some really good diamonds in the rough there. But otherwise, I've followed along all the Marvel movies and things like that every year, all the big blockbusters as well. But I'd say science fiction and any sort of good drama with a good script and a good story is something that I'm really into. I'm sort of more drawn into filmmaking as like an art form as well as like storytelling. I think is the movies that grab me the most. So I guess that encompasses a wide range of movies.
it does.
About,
Yeah, I think for me, horror. If I had to pick a genre, if someone said, "What's your favorite genre?" I'd probably say horror.
yeah, right.
But in saying that, I don't like every horror movie, but it tends to be more of, and it's the same with music. It's the same with TV shows. I really just look at it based on its own merits. So even if I'd say,
Yeah,
oh, look, I don't like romantic movies, if there's a movie that appeals to me and it's a romantic movie, I'll watch it.
yeah,
Um, I watch a movie for what the movie's about and the acting and the story and a number of concepts. I wouldn't just go, oh, I don't like that genre,
mm,
so I'm not going to watch it, sort of thing. And now that my kids are a bit older, they're almost 13 and 16, so they're at very different points in their I guess where they're at with movies and TV shows. And so with my daughter and I, we often sit together and watch rom-coms. So
yeah,
because like we watched Notting Hill the other day, we've watched Miss Congeniality, we've watched The Proposal, we've watched Marry Me. So those sorts of movies, just I don't know, they tend to fit us as
yeah,
in our relationship. And then my son, he's just got through Stranger Things, and we're watching
yeah.
the Marvel movies, and he just likes things that are big. So he likes Godzilla, Pacific Rim, just
Right.
those things that don't really have to have a good story.
They're
There's
just
just
action.
lots of
Yeah,
action and lots
yeah,
of violence and stuff. So yeah, you do find, and I'm sure you'll find as eventually if you have kids
yeah.
and as they grow up, that does determine what you watch a little bit.
Yeah, well,
Um,
I do have. My brother has a son, and he's my nephew, and we just watched the Mario movie recently. That was good
oh
fun.
yeah,
Like something that
yeah,
was just, obviously I played a lot of those video games growing up, and the amount of references and fan service in the jam packed in that movie was fun. Look, it was something you just kind of switched off and
yeah,
enjoyed. But yeah,
yeah.
I like the cinema going experience still. So still try and get to the cinema as much as possible. I hope that cinemas stay around and we're not
Mm.
all watching on Netflix and things like that for in the future, because there is something about like going to the movies that I still
Yeah.
really enjoy. Yeah.
Yeah, look, I've got a friend, a good mate of mine, who we try to go once a week to the movies to see something.
Oh,
There's always
nice. Yeah.
something on, and we've noticed since COVID, there's certainly a lot less people going to the
Yeah.
movies,
I would definitely
which
imagine so.
which is a worry. Well, it's nice in terms of it means there's no one in the movie, but
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's the bonus for you there. But in
yeah,
terms of that cinema being around,
I know
maybe not so much.
it's hard. Yeah, so I'm the same. I really, because I still think going to the movies is an experience, and for kids as well. Like yeah,
Yeah.
my kids love going to the movies. So
Yeah.
um, I mean we'll start wrapping up soon. But travel wise, you said you've been to the States. You've said you've been to Europe.
Yeah.
Any favorite destinations, like places you would sort of jump at the chance to go back to?
I was just having a conversation to a friend who's actually going to Japan soon, and I've been there before, but I would definitely jump at the chance to go back to a place like that before. I think the last time I went, like I said before, I'm a pretty keen skier, so we went and focused most of our holiday on skiing. We did spend maybe a few nights in Tokyo, but didn't actually see as much as probably I would have liked. Like the thing about Japan is that it's such a different culture to where we are, but it's still a place that feels super safe and super welcoming, and everyone's extremely friendly. It's it's a first world country, but there's still just beautiful landscapes. The city is there's so much happening there. So I would love to go back to Japan. It's always again a place that was great fun skiing and things like that, but I think that would be a lovely place to go. And I think we also want to go back to Europe, but in a summer holiday this time as well. So last time we did we did Switzerland, and we went up to Finland as well, and all of those sort of like wintry destinations, Austria, and a few other places there as well. But this time we'd want to go back and do like Italy and Greece and things like that if we could. It's a bit of a trip, a bit of a hike from here, but it's definitely something we want to tick off the old bucket list. So those are probably the two big spots.
Yeah. No, that's fair. So last question, and this is back on fantasy a little bit. Victor Wembanyama is going to.
Oh yes,
he'll be picked number one. I think we can agree on that.
Yeah, he can fall over and break his leg, and he'll still be picked number one.
I think so. Yes.
Yeah.
Having done my rankings already, I've already sort of got an idea of where I see him in my rankings. And again, rankings aren't everything, but
yeah.
Looking into next season, I guess, where are you projecting? Well, what are you projecting his ADP will be come the start of the season? So the hype's very real. Once we hit that sort of peak draft season, early mid October, what do you think his ADP will be? And probably a different answer. It has been a different answer for most analysts. Where would you be comfortable drafting him?
It's funny. I probably I saw that some of these episodes have dropped, and I've been meaning to watch them, but I haven't had a look at them yet. But I'll be interested to see what other analysts are saying. But I expect, based on what I foresee the hype being around this guy, that I actually think that ADP wise, Victor Wembanyama will be going in the first round. I think that he's going to be someone that people just will jump at any chance to have this guy on their fantasy team, because he's going to be, and it's very exciting. It's extremely exciting for the sport, for fantasy basketball, for the NBA, because I think he's going to draw in a lot of fans who maybe have been tuned out of the NBA for a little while, and some casual fans a bit more into it, because he's the alien, right? Like he's this LeBron James level type talent. So I think just the hype and the fun around a player like Victor Wembanyama is going to be crazy. So I think he's going to be going in the first round personally. I probably wouldn't be wanting to draft him until at the earliest. And again, I haven't done any of my rankings for next year so far. I'm working on some dynasty rankings, and I'm going to be releasing my top 25 soon. He will definitely be in that and quite high. But in terms of redraft for next year, look, he could potentially be a first round at the end of the year. I know Karl-Anthony Towns was in his rookie year, but I don't ever want to bank on that. So I'd probably be drafting him maybe in the 20s is about where I'd expect to be drafting him or wanting to get him, which means I'm probably not going to get him. Maybe at the highest, if I wanted to just go crazy, I'd get him to the late teens, but I expect him to be gone from there. How does that rank to what other people have said? I'm not sure at all.
Oh, look, there's been largely most people are similar. So I think we're sort of settling on his ADP probably being back end of the first, early second. So I think sort of from about pick 10, maybe down. I agree. I think with the hype, people are just going to want him on their team no matter what.
I think lock in a first round. He could even push into the mid first round.
Maybe. Looking at the rankings already, and again, it is very early and there's a lot that could change, but it is looking a little bit like this year where if you don't get the first, maybe second pick, you're actually going to be much better off drafting pick 10, 11, 12. Because from about pick 8 or 9, there's probably a round's worth of players that could
Yeah.
easily be first rounders. I think Wembanyama will fall into that bucket. AD, in terms of where people are wanting to get him, most are sort of saying, well, ideally the third, maybe the second,
Yeah.
but
I
there's
think
no
that's
way
about where
he'll
I
be
am as
available.
well.
So,
Yeah.
look, I'm
Because I think
probably...
from memory, I had Chet Holmgren. If I just compare him before his injury, I think I had him ranked sort of late 30s in my season guide rankings. And I think Victor's probably maybe a round better than that, just because of his offensive upside a little bit more so. So yeah, that probably put him in sort of the mid 20s, I'd say, is about where I'd be getting. So yeah, start of the third, early or late second.
But as you said, we're not going to get him there.
No, I don't think that's going to be happening, which is a shame. I just hope that I get a high pick in one of my dynasty leagues and snag him there.
Well, look, I'll probably just go in a few draft only leagues and just take him.
Just take a swing.
Just to have him. I've got to have him somewhere.
Yeah.
So look, that'll wrap things up for the show. Thanks for coming on.
No worries, mate.
Now you've obviously got the AFL stuff going on, and you said you're starting to do some dynasty content and roll that out. Can you give us any specific details as to what will be coming out over the next 2-3 months?
Yeah, so if you haven't already, go check out the last couple of videos I put up. I've done a sort of a video on what have we learnt from the 2022-23 season, just more both for myself and other things I've noticed around the fantasy community on what we did well, what we didn't do well, what can we improve on in the future with our preseason and during the season rankings and analysis of fantasy guys. And then we also took a deep dive into players who broke out after the trade period and guys who fell off the trade period as well. So they're my most recent podcast you can go check out. We're going to now move on into draft/dynasty content over on the Ball Boys Fantasy Basketball channel. So I'm going to be starting a top 100 dynasty rankings mini series where I'm going to be doing sort of, I think I'm planning to do 4 parts, sort of 25 spots at a time. So next week I'll be revealing my top 25 rankings for dynasty leagues. So that's basically if you were doing a startup draft, what kind of ranking would I sort of look at these guys?
Yeah.
And it's tough with a dynasty league, but I guess it's kind of just trying to put a value of a player in terms of like their currency in a draft league, a dynasty league. So if you were looking to either trade or acquire one of these guys, what kind of pieces would you have to give up is another way to look at it as well. And then also we'll be starting to dive into the draft class coming through. So when we get closer, I'll start to do some big boards, some mock drafts and things like that, start to look at some comparisons between some of the prospects coming through and then eventually doing some dynasty rookie rankings as we get into the draft and we know the draft order and all those sort of things. So yeah, that's what's on the horizon. And and before you know it, we'll be back into preseason mode. So
that's right.
That's
and look, who did I can't think. I did. Alex Reclean was my last show, and we actually talked a little bit about dynasty, and I think it's slowly growing. I think Matt Lawson agrees with me a bit. The dynasty space is growing, and people are becoming more aware. But I think it's important. Not everyone is into dynasty, and you don't have to be, and that's fine. But even if you're not into dynasty, I really think if you can just keep your foot in the door and listen into like your dynasty stuff, Matt, Rhett Bauer does some, Noah Rubin's got his new podcast out. Just listening in and staying across what's happening in dynasty leagues and with players and rookies and that sort of thing can only help you when it comes to redraft leagues for next season. So I think even if just because you're not, I don't want to do dynasty, that doesn't mean you shouldn't be at least just listening to 1 or 2 podcasts a week. I mean, we've all
absolutely, and especially because like you can get those guys that break out halfway through the season where dynasty managers have probably been on these guys for a couple of years now. We're sort of we know this guy's got the potential in him. All he needs is this role or whatever, and that can inform you to at least, even if it's not the start of your year, at least chuck them in your watch list or something like that, and you're already one step ahead of everyone else who's kind of just tuning in when the preseason starts. So I would definitely agree with that. It definitely helps redraft people as well, stay across the news.
It does. Yep. All right, cool. So thanks. Look, as I said, thanks for coming on. Go and check out Mitch. Check out all of his stuff, Ball Boys Fantasy. That will do it for the show today. Remember, check out all of our content. FBIbasketball.com is the website. All of Matt's stuff's there, my player rankings. We've got these interviews coming out, 2 a week for the next probably 3 months. You can follow us on Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Apple Podcasts. Give us a thumbs up. That would be great. We're trying to get to 1,000 subscribers. That would be nice, but we'll see how we go. Until next time, catch up.
You just listened to another episode from the Fantasy Basketball International Podcast Network. Thanks for joining us. And for more information about joining our community, please check out our website at fbibasketball.com.